UFC 314 just happened last night, guys. I'm here the morning after giving you a post-fight recap and reaction. First off, I want to say this, guys. This has been the best card of the year so far, and it looked that way before this fight got announced, that this was possibly going to be the most stacked fight of the year, and it delivered. And the absolute war that we got in the main event, absolutely delivered. We're going to start with the first fight, Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. Alexander Volkanovski defeats Diego Lopez by unanimous decision. What a storyline. What a war this was. Alexander Volkanovski had so many things against him in this fight. Not even talking about the back-to-back losses that he had by KO. People were doubting him and saying things like, his chin is not there and things of that sort. But he was going against the curses. The Drake curse. Drake put a really big bet pay down on him. And he had the over 35 curse against him as well. If you don't know what that is, there's a stat going around somewhere that people who are over 35 don't win championships under the welterweight weight class. And Volkanovski beat that. He beat the custom shorts curse. So many things were against him in this main event, and he found a way to get it done. Round one, we had a pretty much vintage-esque Volkanovski. The way he operated, the way he was moving, the way he was landing his jab, finding his shots, utilizing his balanced arsenal, that kind of reminded me a lot of the Yair fights, and it was looking like the Yair fights in that first round. I had this fight 4-1 Volk, and it's pretty debatable whether it was the second round he lost or whether it was the fourth round he lost. But I would say the fourth round had a much more bigger effect on a loss round for Volkanovski than the second round, because he was chipping away in that second round, and until he got caught by that shot at the end of the second round, then we can debate whether or not he won that round or not. But round four, definitely, the ending of round four had my heart beating. This fight felt like a horror movie. This fight felt like a suspense movie, because we got to see the skill of Volkanovski versus the power of Lopez, because Lopez had that hunger, of course, but we wanted to see how Volkanovski would deal with this, especially coming with the back-to-back losses and all those curses against him, right? Him coming back in that fifth round and winning that fifth round and fighting like a champion in that fifth round was something to see. Another thing I really liked about this fight and what really showed the effect, this is something in MMA too as well. When you stagger your opponent, it goes in your favor when you stagger your opponent and you manipulate their balance. Yes, he was landing those jabs, he was chipping away, he was moving to his right, but sometimes off-balancing your opponent along with the jab game really helps you and puts the fight in your favor and makes it look like you're dominating the fight because you're balanced and your opponent's losing your balance. It's just something that comes from Muay Thai most of the time, but I'm really happy to see this more in MMA because it's a really effective strategy. Now, let's talk about Diego Lopez really quick. Diego Lopez, he had the hunger. But you cannot blame a guy like that. He was going against possibly the greatest featherweight of all time. And once you have a guy like that in front of you, it's easy to say these things on, looking at the screen. But when you're fighting somebody like that with the skill level and abilities of Volkanovski, it is very hard to get your shots off, especially like the way Volkanovski fights with the intercepting jabs and things of that sort. It's very hard to get your game going. Yes, he did land a couple shots, and yes, he did, pull through and try to go for the uppercut, which is a significant punch that Volkanovski is susceptible to. But Volkanovski has an all-round game, and he has things to go to after when things don't work for him. I gotta say, Diego Lopez is a warrior. I still believe that Diego Lopez can be champion again in the future. I'm really excited to see what this division has for us in the future and what moves these fighters are gonna make after this fight. Moving on to the co-main event, Paddy Pimblett versus Michael Chandler. What did I tell you guys? What did I tell you guys about Michael Chandler? He's not going to change. He's a warrior. He is great in the first round. But after that, it's all instinct. Michael Chandler is honestly the closest descendant to a caveman when we were fighting. The 2-year gap that he had with Conor McGregor was possibly the worst career move ever. Because I think he could have at least 2 more fights done between them. But he was busy waiting for Conor McGregor, the red panty night, as people call it. And I don't blame him. Conor is a big name. And even if that fight happened, I still would have gotten with Conor winning that fight. But the reason that fight was so electric was because Conor is also a first round guy, but Conor obviously has more skills in his arsenal to finish fights, winning by decision. I mean, i.e. the Nate Diaz second fight. But it was so electric because we both knew that these two guys were gonna bang in that first round. But unfortunately, the fight didn't happen. Got to give props to Michael Chandler. Even though he was out for 2 years, he wasn't sitting on his ass. He was still training. If you follow him on Instagram, you will see him training, doing some really hard stuff, looking shredded, looking like he's made out of steel, right? He was still doing those things. But it's something different being there in the octagon, actually having some ring time, having some octagon time, to correct myself. That's much, much more different than just training in the gym, doing a couple drills. Going through a fight camp, that has its own experience as well. And it's unfortunate to really see another back-to-back loss from Michael Chandler. I really hope something happens in him. I can imagine his coaches like just having to support this guy, giving all these game plans, and then he goes in there and nothing works. Either nothing works or he just reverts to something else. I just wish his coaches or something can really get through him to make sure he wins fights technically, because I know he's entertaining. He likes to go for the finish and things of that sort, but seeing him at the end of his fights disfigured, having big cuts and having to get stitches and all that stuff, it's just not nice. If you're a human being and you actually care about people, it's very sad seeing fights like this happen. That's all I have to say about Michael Chandler. I don't know what the next move for him is, but like I said, I still believe that if Michael Chandler was the average UFC prospect, he would have gotten cut 2 fights ago. But again, his name has value, and I would love to see him against maybe Fazee, maybe somebody that at the lower end of the rankings. Maybe that might get him to bump up a little bit. But Paddy Pimblett is legit. Paddy Pimblett made a statement in this fight, guys. A lot of improvements to his game, not just his grappling, but to his striking decisions as well. Paddy Pimblett was well known earlier on to keep his chin up and, throw things to get to the takedown, throw things to get to the grappling. And right now, he's getting closer. He's closing that gap between being a grappler that uses his striking to set up his grappling to being a complete fighter that can either take you out in the striking or take you out in the grappling. You're fucked either way. And he's cleaned up his striking. I'm so impressed by his arsenal. One thing that really made me believe in Paddy was he said this in interviews, because I usually watch the interviews. He said that he realizes he has talent, which is true. Paddy does have talent. But he said, hey, I have to work hard, because hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, right? He also said that he's going to lock in now more. He's not going to get as big off camp, which is a good thing. So he's really, really switched on. And honestly, the trajectory in which his career has gone so far is perfect. The whole weight fluctuation thing in the beginning of his career and his antics with maybe Ilia Topuria or just building fans, becoming a superstar, that happened. That had its place in time. Right now, it's time for Paddy to get serious. Right now, it's time for Paddy to lock in, because if you're in the lightweight division, as stacked as it is, you have to make sure that you're locked in as a contender. If you want to win that belt, if you want to get to Islam Makhachev or whoever's going to own that belt in the lightweight division, now is the right time for Paddy Pimblett to make those moves by not getting so big out of camp and locking in, increasing your arsenal, making sure your striking is as balanced and you don't have one thing that's overweighted than the other thing. And he did just that. Jumping knee, very unexpected. It's a good shot selection versus a guy like Michael Chandler who likes to be low. I wasn't surprised by a lot of things Michael Chandler did, but I was very, very impressed and surprised by the things that Paddy Pimblett did. This was an amazing finish by Paddy. I can't wait to see what he does with the ranked opponents. I truly think Paddy should get the Moicano fight after this. I don't quite think he's ready for the Dustins and the Justins just yet. I think one more fight after this, then doing the Justin and the Dustin fights, because those guys have a different level of skill, have a different level of power. I'm not saying he can't knock those guys out or sub them. What I am saying is that if he does one more fight after this to boost his confidence, to work on some other tools then he might have enough to be ready for the Dustins, Justins, the Charles, those guys at the top of that division. So I think Moicano is the best person to go with because they also have a little bit of beef. I think that fight will sell pretty well. Moving on to the next fight down the card, I'm going to briefly go through this. We have Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. Yair Rodriguez winning by unanimous decision against Pitbull. Guys, this was as expected. It's what happens. You're under bright lights. UFC has such strong branding. Okay, this is an example. If you want to make a personal brand and you want to be a big monopolized company like UFC, take notes from them. When fighters come from other organizations and they come into the UFC for their UFC debut, it's different. It doesn't matter if you've been champion. It doesn't matter if you're the greatest fighter in that other fighting company. When you come to the UFC, it's not that the skill level of the UFC fighters are different. I can talk about that later, but the fact that the UFC brand is so strong, it makes the fighters look more higher skill, or in fact, it pressures them to be more higher skill. So when you come into the UFC, the bright lights, the lights are a little bit brighter, the arena is a little bit more filled up. Your performance just isn't going to match versus those regional MMA organizations you have been. Yair Rodriguez, I got to say, I was so impressed by him. I think he has a better chance of hitting Volkanovski more if they do have that rematch, if that rematch does happen. I still don't think he's going to win, but I think it's going to be a bigger war than it was in the first time. Yair Rodriguez showed that he is a true martial artist and he knows how to game plan. One thing about fighters most of the time is that they tend to just have strengths. They favor certain strikes and they only use those certain strikes in fights. And this is why they get figured out, i.e. Israel Adesanya with his left kicks and the way he operates, or any other fighter that has tendencies. When you have such a big arsenal as a fighter, it's very hard for you to focus on the power shots. You don't give each and every single technique the same attention. So it's a little bit hard to get knockouts with a guy that has such a big arsenal because you don't know. It's very hard for your brain to distribute which one has the best power distribution, the best power output on your opponent. So one thing I liked about Yair here was the way he approached this fight. He stood his ground. He wasn't bouncing around as much as he used to. And he was moving with a very Muay Thai-esque pace. Staying still, keeping that pace low, and picking his shots, taking what's available pretty much, and just showing that there's levels to this. I really like Yair's ability to throw kicks from close range, and the way he turns his hips and just snaps his hips and lands those head kicks. He doesn't need much of a telegraph. That is a fighter that you need to study. If you want to learn how to throw high kicks correctly in the UFC, look at Yair Rodriguez and the way he uses his delivery systems to get his kicks to the domes of his opponent. But props to Yair for winning this fight. I'm excited to see what he has next. I think because of what happened at press conference, he should go to Diego Lopez. That can be the title eliminator before they go to the Volkanovski fight. Either way, whoever wins that fight between Yair and Lopez will be a rematch for Volkanovski. Lastly, I'm going to stop by this fight because the video is getting too long. The Bryce Mitchell-Jean Silva fight. Aside from the politics and the things that Bryce Mitchell is saying, I don't want to focus on that right now. I want to focus on combat sports. The first round went well for Bryce. I had Bryce winning that first round, but I knew it was just the beginning of the end. Because if you listen to my last point in the right Yair Rodriguez fight, if you're a guy that has a big arsenal and you have a lot of tools, it's very hard for you to knock somebody out. Because you have so many tools, you haven't trained enough power shots with those tools. I'm still debating in my head whether partially it was Jean Silva playing with Bryce Mitchell, because he was getting in his head. All those things in the pre-fight antics, press conferences, the weigh-ins, all that kind of calculated back to the ring, and he was even talking to him in the octagon. I still partially think it was due to just Jean Silva, again, probing and seeing what Bryce had for him, but at the same time trying to get into his head. I think he gave away that round, but Bryce still had a tremendous effort in kicking the legs. Even the Jeet Tech, the side kick to the leg, shooting that, moving. He looked really good, really crisp in that first round, and I would give him that first round if I'm being honest. So the second round went exactly as it went. I thought he was going to win by KO, but it's even more just dog that he won by submission. finished him with a ninja choke, which is a variation of the guillotine choke, and he pretty much got him. So there's not much I can say about that fight. It was expected. Gian Silva is a very promising prospect. I think he takes a ranked opponent next. One thing I like about him is that he has leverage in his shots. Another thing, too, if you want to knock out your opponent, or if you want to notice who has more knockout power versus their opponent, is who has the best leverage. Leverage as in their stance, the way that they stand and the way that they throw their punches. Bryce Mitchell tends to stand tall, and he doesn't really look like he has the leverage to really land the power shots. So Gian Silva here did what he had to do. I think he still had this in the bag. I think he could have taken out Bryce in that first round if he wanted to. But again, he was playing with him, and he really wanted to break him down, and he did so in that second round, finishing by ninja choke. Last fight I'm going to talk about in the main event. I don't have much to talk about this. Dominic Reyes versus Nikita Krylov. Dominic Reyes finishes Nikita Krylov by first round TKO. I can't say much about Krylov in this fight. He did try to go for a really big blitz to get to Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes took him out with a left hand, moving backwards. That is skill. You know, after the John Jones fight, which people say he arguably won, when you have fights like that, you know, another case is Kevin Gastelum facing Israel Adesanya. The fights he had after that, he was losing. It was very hard for him to win. Once you break that fourth gate, there's a bit of a curse there as well. When you have the hardest fight of your life, and you just cannot break that level once more. And I think possibly Israel was going through that too as well. You know, knocking out his rival, knocking out Alex Pereira was something so big for him that he just can't get to that level of tenacity anymore with his, 3 losses in a row so far. Knocking somebody out with your weak hand is one thing, but knocking somebody out while moving backwards is the biggest proof of skill ever. So I want to say shout out to Dominic Reyes for getting back on the win column. I think if he takes Nikita Krylov's ranking in this fight and goes up in the rankings, he might cause some problems with the light heavyweight division. I want to see him versus Jan next. Maybe that might be a really good fight. But yeah, I don't want to talk so much about the fights they're going to have next. I could possibly make another video about that and talk about what are the best matchups after this UFC event. But that's it. That's the post-fight recap of the main event of UFC 314, guys. Great night of fights. If the UFC takes this trajectory and makes more fights like these, stacks them in just the right way, you don't have to overstack them, that'll be great. That'll be great. I think Tom Aspinall, John Jones is probably going to be the next big card. Tom Aspinall, John Jones, and or Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev. I really want to see those fights. So far, it's looking like a pretty profitable year for the UFC. Let's keep that ball rolling.